Hello and welcome to episode 5 of No Blueprint featuring Andrea Menard. She is an award-winning singer, songwriter, actress, but not only that, she is a self-proclaimed goddess and part of the rise of the Sacred Feminine, as well as owner and founder of the Sacred Feminine Learning Lodge. Andrea Menard, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, Justin, I am so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So grateful. So first, I want to make sure I pay homage and thank the creator for this moment in time for us to connect. I'm really grateful for this whole new blueprint series and the relationships I get to connect with. So I'm grateful for the creator for allowing this to happen, for us to meet, for us to cross paths the way we have and connect here today. I also want to thank our audience for tuning in on all platforms. I think as much as our guest is important, so is the audience. So I want to make sure I pay homage and thank all of our audience and our listeners out there. And I want to pay homage to the territory that I reside on. I'm here on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. So I wanted to make sure I pay homage and respect to our Algonquin relatives out here. And of course, again, I will emphasize before we got started, I was letting Andrea Menard know how starstruck I am to have her here today. So again, to our guest, Andrea, thank you for being part of this No Blueprint series.
It's my honor, my friend. You're doing great work. So happy to share.
First question I'd like to ask you is really more or less of a personal question, and just to check in with you and see how are you doing through these COVID times. It's really crazy out there, and so I just wanted to check in with you and see how are you doing through this quarantine moment.
Yeah, well, the first 3 weeks were rough. I lost every gig in sight, and I was supposed to host 2 retreats in Hawaii. Bam, everything got canceled. So it was pretty brutal. But at being a creative person and being someone who's here to help facilitate the rise of the sacred feminine, I went inward, and man, I'm on the other side of the birthing canal. So all the pain and blood and sweat, I'm on this side now, and I see the beauty of what Mother Earth has in store for us. And there's not going to be going back to normal. We're creating a new normal, and I think that's very, very good news. There's a lot of suffering going on, a lot of fear, but I think it's a collective trauma that is being invited to be dealt with. We got to deal with that collective trauma so that it doesn't get stuck in our lineages again. We just got to we got to deal. We got to go inside. We got to hang in there and rise up to be our best self for each other, for ourselves and each other.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I think that's what's really interesting for me, reflecting on what you're saying about connecting with amazing artists in so many different industries, not just in music and film and movies, but also in design and fashion. Being creative through these COVID times seems to be our go-to outlet. And I think that's so amazing. And I think some of the other people that I've spoken to, they also kind of touched on the fact that this is a unique way for a spiritual awakening as well, where people have to really dig deep within themselves and rebalance and look at their situation and kind of find themselves in it again, because this world has been so busy for so long. It's kind of a nice break for it to kind of just switch off and for us to collect ourselves and rebalance. So I love what you had to say about going with inside yourself and finding that balance and using your creative outlets to, get through these COVID times. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and where does creativity live?
Mm,
Inside.
inside.
It's not
And that's
it's inside first and then gets manifested. Everything goes into the womb of creation first, and then so we got to go inside to create a new world.
straight up. Listen, I'm going to emphasize to our audience, I want you to be ready for this conversation. Andrea Menard is an amazing human being with incredible insight. And you'll take this in. We're gonna go to a different realm. I think being able to talk to you, I'm so much looking forward to the type of language that we can have a conversation. Tapping into things, energy, all of these different frequencies that have a different language to it. I think learning about your journey and a lot of the stuff that you've done, I'm really looking forward to that as well. So before we dive too deep, though, I'd love for us to kind of back up just a second and share with us, where are your parents from and where did you grow up?
Well, I was a typical Métis kid and we moved around a lot. I was born in Flin Flon, and my father is from Fisher Branch around like Treaty, well, a lot of the reserves are Treaty 5, but in Treaty 2 territory in Manitoba. My mom's family is English, Irish, and Icelandic, and they um, are islanders who ended up living in Flin Flon. So both, live in Manitoba. I didn't live there for very long. I moved around a lot as a kid following my dad, so a little nomadic, creative man my father was. Um, and we're, so I ended up living across the prairie provinces and never really feeling connection to home per se until much later. And my parents now live back where my dad is from. And I lived in Saskatchewan for 30 years. And now I'm living in Vancouver. So I've been in the Coast Salish territories for 8 years now, and finding home once again.
Right. Fascinating. I can relate to you in a couple ways. The first way is I actually grew up in Manitoba myself. I'm just from
Mm.
Winnipeg.
Oh
So
yeah.
we're from the same province in that sense. And then my First Nation community is actually in Saskatchewan. It's Ocean Man First Nation. It's close to Stoughton.
Yeah.
So it just seems like our energy frequencies and our relationship to the land kind of resonate as well.
Oh, that prairie. Oh, the
Yeah,
prairie heart.
right?
Yeah.
Definitely, 100%. So on that note, just kind of tapping into your past a little bit, what is one of your favorite earliest childhood memories, the first one that comes to mind?
I have, um, first of all, my dad was the king of the kitchen party. So watching my mom harmonize with my dad and my dad sort of take the stage around the kitchen table, those are good memories because I just started learning to harmonize, because dad was the star. So there was no taking the stage from dad. I mean, occasionally he'd give me, I'd sing Mary Had a Little Lamb or something. But, learning to harmonize and learning how to be supportive to his star and mom's beautiful harmonies was a beautiful memory. And just watching the love of the family, of extended family and friends who really loved my dad, loved those moments. And another one is on my mom's side of the family. We had a cabin that we had to get to by boat on Lake Athapapaskow in Flin Flon, and there was no power. There was it was like the closest to living off the land that I had experienced to date. And because my dad was very urban, he'd lived and worked in, not that he was major urban, but he lived in towns and cities. But when we would go to this cabin, it was the first time that I really heard the waters sing and the birds and have no noise. And I recognize how sensitive I was to my environment and why I had so many layers of defense. So that when you were just in nature, I went, wow, nothing's hitting me. This is just incredible. And it was the first time I wrote a song, and it was the first time, I drove a boat and swam in the middle of a lake, and all those beautiful memories that are associated with the land and the natural elements.
Amazing. That's so beautiful. And one of the other questions, and if you need any context here, by all means, ask me. But I wanted to know, when did you start learning about your identity and who you are as a human being?
Well, obviously how I look, I'm very light skinned, and so was my dad. And he married a very blue eyed, dark haired woman and, white woman. And so identity was just something in my teens. I started to recognize that there was a split, and I didn't really understand much of it. I didn't understand how I fit in it. I knew I was Métis, but that didn't mean anything like it does now. I didn't have that. It was just, that's who you were, whatever. But it was like saying, well, I have dark hair. It was just a fact, but there wasn't a lot of, some families were really, political or had activists or had something that really held them to their identity. And I didn't. Ours was music. Music was our identity, sort of. And didn't really have close friends until I have close friends, and then I'd move away. And so for me, that question started to happen when I started to recognize what racist comments were and how they fit me and how they didn't fit me. I'm like, what? So it was definitely something I developed, as an identity. And then it was a crisis because once I started to step into that role, people shoved me into roles that I went, whoa, I don't speak for people. I don't speak for anyone but me. And it was a very confusing time. And my one woman show, The Velvet Devil, was my looking at it, because you have a few little talents and all of a sudden you get a little bit of notoriety, and then everyone wants that you to be this. And I went, I don't know if I fit that. So it was a very, when you're young, you don't quite have a voice yet, and I didn't have a voice yet to articulate any of this stuff. But I grew into it, and each of the experiences got me, I became stronger about who I am. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I love actually how you described music as the identity
Mm,
earlier on for you. Like that makes so much sense. And when you said that, it actually made me quickly reflect over my own musical career and how music was actually my outlet where I learned more about my identity as well.
mhm,
And like the first time for me that this whole historical context of what was done to us, not who we are, but what was done to us, a very important distinction to make,
mhm,
was during the TRC's first national event in 2008 at the Forks. And I'm there as sports tent coordinator. So I was working on with the team and working behind the scenes. And so I got to kind of dive a little bit deeper in the intentions behind the event, but
mm,
looking over at like so many amazing Indigenous people gather at the Forks and being part of such an amazing national apology for what took place
mhm,
was my moment where I was like, what does all of this mean? Like all of my grandmothers attended residential school, so I had to know what was going on. So I appreciate that you made the reference to music as your identity growing up, because it was my music that allowed me to channel that energy and explore these topics. So I
mhm.
relate to that in a major way. That's amazing.
And the generation that you're coming from, as opposed to mine, is that there's a real awakening that has happened amongst our young people that I'm really excited to see. There's a real ownership that it took a little bit of courage for mm, my generation, a little older, to walk in so fully, walk in so um, with such voice. And
Mm.
the young people have such voice and pride, which just thrills me to no end. But to see the change from just 30 years ago of what that looked like, and then think of my parents 30 years before that, so
Wow.
really exciting to see.
That's
You have a different
insight.
landscape.
Amazing insight, honestly. Like you've been in this game for so long, and it's like you have an amazing career. I mean, we're talking 5-time Gemini Award nominee. You won the 2008 award, 15-time music award winner. This is incredible. So I wanted you to take us back to the first award that you won. Was it the 2005 for your album Simple Steps, Western Canadian Music Awards? Because that was the earliest date that I can find.
Yeah.
Because then there's your acting career, which is 2006 Best Actress for American Indian Movie Award
Yeah.
for Best Ensemble. So what was
Well,
the first
wow,
award?
check you out. That's good research.
Yeah.
Um, what was the first? I may have gotten nominated for a Western Canadian Music Award for my Velvet Devil
Mm.
album. But it was a jazzy album, so it was kind of a weird fit in the Indigenous category, the Aboriginal category. I think 2005. was a big year for me. I got a whole bunch of nominations as an actor, as my album, and it was a pretty overwhelming year. And I I don't know if I felt worthy of any of it. I think I kind of went, ah. So I think there was just so many in a row in that. I think it was an October and November just splat of about 4 or 5 awards ceremonies, and they were the weirdest thing to be going, I don't even know what any of this means.
Mm.
This isn't why I did this, but is it why I did this? Does this matter? Look at these awards, look at these things. It was the strangest year of my life.
Wow.
A big year, but yeah, 2005, I think, was a big year.
Wow.
Very odd.
So how did you navigate that feeling of, that uncertainty of being acknowledged for the work that you've done? How did you navigate that?
I don't know if I handled it very well, to tell you the truth.
Hmm.
Back then, I didn't realize that I was an introvert at heart.
Hmm.
I just thought, because I'm very capable of being out in the world, but it exhausts me. And I can get a little crazy. So back then I didn't recognize that about myself. So I wondered why I just went into hiding afterwards. Because I did. I went into hiding practically. And it's funny, I think I actually went into a spiral of really wondering what that meant, of what it all meant. And I found that that I may have come out of it when I hosted or I performed on the well, at the time they were the National Aboriginal Achievement Awards or the
Right.
Inspire Award. Maybe that was like a gig soon after that, maybe the next big award show I did. And I went, oh, this makes much more sense. These people are doing work that is really changing the world. I want to be at these events. I don't know if like singing, is this really weird? It was a really interesting question about what these award shows did to our egos. And
Right.
if I really wanted to be, if I needed it, or if it was just an accident that happened because of the work I did. And I started to question that. But at the Inspire Awards, I went, see, these folks really earned it. Oh my gosh. Oh, it was a real crisis in, I don't know if this is good enough for me. I don't know if
Wow.
this is what I'm meant to do. Yeah.
Super interesting. So the kind of leads me into a question that I've been having a discussion with every guest is, how do you take care of your mental health? Especially in such a fast-paced industry
Mm.
with so much going on, even the crabs in the bucket situation, when you're only trying to do your best and tell your story. Like, how do you manage your emotions and your mental health in the
Mm.
career that you've had?
I The way I did it, is, I mean, I have many, many tools and I reuse them and I discover new tools and I ask for, I'm always using tools to ground myself, to amplify my own self-empowerment, all of those things. But one tool I think I did automatically without recognizing that I had done it as a safety valve was I never fully dove into one genre. As
Mm.
you can tell, I've got a lot of things going on.
True.
So I could never be a full-time musician, singer, because I need quiet, and amplified music every single day of my life would have just drove me insane. And I went, oh, is that why I can't see? Again, didn't realize I was an introvert, but I had built in, you know, I never went on tour like some artists who are constantly on tour. I never did that. And I don't think I could have handled it. So there was that. And because I had acting, so I would be on a film set during festival season. So, oh, I'm an actor. Oh, I can't go and do that. Or I would do a Christmas, or a holiday tour or something like that, because um, it broke up the touring time. And then as an actor, I would break up that with theater, and then theater with film, and then back to music. And then when those industries were quiet, I would be writing. So I had all
Wow.
these things to play with, that when one was loud, the other ones got quiet. When one got, active, the other ones got quiet. So I never bought in fully into any one industry, which could have been a problem, which
Mm.
could have been detrimental to my career in some way. It could have. I mean, and maybe it has been. Um, but that has been my safety valve. That has helped me with my mental health because I never got when one was quiet, something else would rise up and I would get to focus in a creative way to that. Does that make sense?
Wow. Honestly, like it's so therapeutic to listen to you. And I say that because it might just be that I relate to you in those facets that you're talking about. It might be because I relate to some of those facets in the sense that I've been dabbling in so many different things myself. And
Mm,
hearing what you're saying is just helping me realize these things. And that's what I mean by therapeutic. Like, I don't realize a lot of the things that I maybe have experienced until I'm hearing it from somebody else articulating in the
yeah.
beautiful way that you have. So that's amazing. So I think if I can encourage people to not shy away from exploring different facets of their creativity. You know, if you want to be an artist and a musician, do that. If you want to try acting, do that. If you want to try art, visual art, do that. If you want to try podcast or content creation, do that. And I
Totally.
think it allows you that freedom so that when one gets quiet, you can, you know, dive deeper into the others. And that makes so much sense when it comes to that was your response to mental health.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important because we're living in such a fast-paced world when it comes to like social media. And if you're not getting the likes or you're not getting the love on all of your social media, that could probably drive somebody crazy if that's your sole, you
Yeah.
know, outlet for your music career. And that's the only way you're going to make bread and butter. So that is an amazing way to put it in the sense of your mental health.
You know, another way that I used to look at myself now, again, when I was younger, it was acting and singing. And when they go, and I'd always get asked, which one do you like better? And I'd go,
Mm,
I can't just, they're both me. One is
wow.
like my God voice or my spirit voice, and the other one is me being able to ask the questions, the deep human nature questions. They go together. And then when I started writing, there was three. And then when I realized that that spiritual messenger or the speaker or the ambassador or whatever, you know, the woman who's the speaker now, I realized that, oh, of course, I've always been four. I've been four parts of a medicine wheel.
Wow.
Ah, that's why I'm never just
Wow.
one. I can't be one. I've always been four. And it was just that when two parts were active, the other two, like in the last couple of years, they've had to grow and catch up to the first two, the actor and singer. So it's like
Mm,
I'm building all parts of my four parts of the medicine wheel. So I have to be balanced.
damn. Listen, you're making me reflect on the I forget what it was exactly, but you were sharing about those four voices and you were going through them and you were sharing it. I think it was a retreat or a workshop that you were
Oh
doing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like that was so powerful when you broke that down, that those that this physical, this is your tool set. You know, you have a voice, you got feelings, a mind, a spirit, this is your tool set. And so I think that's another way to, I think, connect with that medicine wheel is it doesn't have to necessarily be something you look at all the time. It could be
Mhm.
something that who you are, right? It's
Oh
part
yeah.
of your human being. So I think that's incredible. And actually, I wanted to ask you, and I think you've answered it, but I was going to ask you, what was your first love, singing or acting?
Yeah, no, I mean, the first singing just came naturally to me. So that was something, acting was something I had to learn that you were allowed to do. Like, oh,
Mm,
theater exists. What is that? You know, I mean, I had to learn what it was, but they were always who I am. If I were to say it in the bigger view, I'm an expresser.
mm.
So there, however I'm being asked to express is who I am,
Amazing.
you know?
So let's go back to the Velvet Devil for a second because people need to know that you have writing credits on that and you also starred in it.
Mhm.
And it's a one woman musical stage play.
Yeah.
So share with us, what is it like being a writer and a star in something? Because I think that's interesting to juggle, and what your experience was like creating the Velvet Devil.
Well, I used to say that the Velvet Devil was my emancipator. She was this character that started to haunt me. And she was maybe a personality in me that wanted to be a star, where I didn't. But this character, Velvet Devil, was a star from the 1940s. Like, she was this jazz goddess, you know? And, but this, when I was given the picture and that when I was given her story, I saw a play, a CD, and a movie. All of, like, when I was given the whole package, I was like, oh, wow. Oh, okay, cool. Thinking, oh, I'll just whip those off and do those things because they showed me the success of it. You know, the grandmothers showed me the success of it. And I thought, oh, that'll be easy. Yeah, right. Not easy, because I was this green girl from the bush, kind of, you know. I didn't know anything about any of the industries. And those three things, the play, the radio play, the CD, and the movie, were four different industries.
Right.
And I knew nothing about any of them. And I had to write it. And oh, sorry, and fifth industry, who knows how to write? Like, what are you talking about?
Facts.
So I literally went, okay, if I'm supposed to write this, I literally had a fight with God or the creator or whoever. Literally had a fight and said, okay, if I'm supposed to write this, then you have to write it, because if it's supposed to be here, I don't know what I'm doing, so you have to write it. And I got really mad. and as soon as I would show up to the page and songs came out, and I went, well, I thought it was a play. Geez, you know. So I'm writing songs, like, well, I don't know how to write. I don't know how to write music. So who am I going to write this with? And then I met my co-writer, Robert Walsh, who ended up being my longtime collaborator. But, you know, everything was a struggle because I was so stubborn and so dumb, like beautifully ignorant about the whole thing. So I would walk blindly in, expecting to be helped, but also, you know, because I didn't know anything, it was pretty brutal sometimes. I got some really hard lessons in there. So first of all, writing it was hard, writing the music, and then having to raise money to do this. And, you know, I'd never written a grant in my life. So all of these incredible doors had to be opened in order for the next thing to occur. And if I was too frightened or, oh, I don't know how, you know, I wasn't the bravest. Some people just bash through those doors. I was not one of them. I was very frightened of expansion. Even though I longed for it, I was also, every time I had to expand a new, or take on a new knowledge, I would actually get frightened. So I'd have to overcome another fear, another fear, another fear. So it feels like the Velvet Devil was, and it was 10 years, not just, oh, whip those off in 2. Wow. 10-year journey of this, of my expansion. And she set me free. She literally launched me into all of those industries, and in a successful way. So my goodness, if it wasn't for her, I would still be, I don't know, not here.
Holy. Listen, there's two things that came to mind when you were sharing. The first one is that I want to kind of emphasize what you were saying, and where the Velvet Devil came from is that it came from creation. In the way that you were articulating it, you're talking to creator, and those visions came, and you're like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And he opened up all these doors for you. So I want creators to take that in for a second and realize that you have to make room in your being to receive those messages. And I learned that from Andrea Menard. I learned that from doing this research, that you have to allow yourself to be opened up to be able to receive those messages from your ancestors or from the creator. And those messages that you receive is going to guide you into that next phase in order to take you to where you're supposed to be. So that was the first thing that came to mind when you were sharing. And the last thing I wanted to ask you was more of a question. How did you overcome those fears that you were encountering through that process?
Well, again, back then, I didn't know myself as well as I know myself now. And as an expresser, I would be overloaded and overwhelmed very easy. And I finally realized that one way that helped me, settle down was to cry. I'm a crier. So that is one way. Every time I would be overwhelmed, cry and do. "Ah," and cry and walk through the door. It was just this thing I went through, and I didn't recognize what that overwhelm was. People who are highly sensitive, and if you have never heard that term or read the book, the highly sensitive person changed my life.
Oh,
I
wow.
went, oh, is that our nervous systems are a little bit more challenged than people who are much more in the, in the world. I take in every ounce of knowledge, through my nervous system, and it overwhelms me. So crying is a big one. And my dream is so big, my vision is so big. I'm given a big vision, and so I know how beautiful it is, and I know how great it is, and I just know I have to take the steps. So I get overwhelmed, but I take the steps anyway. I get overwhelmed, but I take the steps anyway, and I
Mm,
cry a lot.
amazing.
I
Yo,
still
crying,
do.
crying is medicine,
Oh, you better believe it.
right? But take the steps anyway.
Absolutely.
So you're allowed to feel afraid,
Oh, it's
but
part of the
take the
whole deal.
steps, but take the steps anyway.
Yeah.
That's a huge takeaway right there. That's
Mhm.
incredible. Okay, so let's dive a little bit more into some of your acting career, because I was extremely, first of all, let me rephrase this. I binged watched in 2 days a 3-season series called Moccasin Flats. I binged. Now, if people haven't seen it, you need to go see it. First of all, it's a classic, but it's still very relevant today. And this is years later. So I wanted to hear from you what your experiences was like working on set for such a impactful series like Moccasin Flats.
Mm. Well, it was Big Soul Productions, two
Yes.
Indigenous women at the helm.
Yes.
First TV series produced, directed, acted by an all Indigenous team. That's
Tell
a
them.
huge deal. And ABTN was brand new back then. So it was
Mm,
like all of a sudden we had help to say, okay, we want to hear these stories. It was about Indigenous youth in Regina, Moccasin Flats, right? It was a big deal. And of course, I had never been so supported. Like I was with my community and with one of
right.
my best friends, Jennifer Bademski, like, come on.
Yeah.
And Michelle Thrush and Laura, just so many amazing people, right? And I found that when you're when you're supported, man, you can help each other rise up, because we may not have all been that experienced yet, but boy, we were sure experienced by the end of it. We had all gained skills, knowledge, experience that now we could compete on a national level, at least for me. And being from Saskatchewan at the time, I needed that extra experience. So yeah, it was remarkable.
Wow.
And I don't know if people know this, because there were lesbian characters on Canadian screens, but this was the first lead Indigenous lesbian period in the Canadian television ever,
Damn.
like a lead character, a lead role. So,
Wow.
we made history. No one
History
even knows,
multiple times in different ways.
right?
Listen, like that series was incredible. Like the first thing that I thought of after taking in that last episode and sitting back and being like, damn, that was some gangster shit right there. It was so gangster. It's how I felt, but so real, so deep, and so intentional in the stories that are being told. Missing and murdered Indigenous women, like so many important topics that I had to ask you about, because especially during that time, and the era of what that context was like when we're discussing indigeneity and feeling that pride to be Indigenous and coming out and having a voice. So I had to ask you about Moccasin Flats. Was there any similarities or comparisons to how you felt doing Blackstone?
Well, because it was Moccasin Flats, I was there the entire time. So that was a family unit. And for me,
Mm,
Blackstone, I came in and out. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be there for the full, I wasn't one of the leads where I was there for the entire show. But of course, because it was mostly, Indigenous created and Indigenous acted and produced and directed, there was that family feel again. There was that unit. But again, Moccasin Flats was my first experience with it, and I was there all the time. So I got to, I have been so blessed to be on Indigenous productions. They are the best.
Tell
We're
them.
like, we got some seriously talented storytellers. So
Yes.
when you are a part of a family like that, there's nothing like it in Blackstone, and now of course Tribal is their next,
Yeah.
so there's nothing like it, and I've been very blessed.
Fascinating. So that leads into my next question was how, in your perspective, has the industry, the film industry, evolved when it comes to Indigenous representation?
Oh, very slowly.
Mm,
Oh, very slowly.
I've heard that before, actually.
It's when you see back when we were just wanting to be on screen, like we just want to get on screen, that everyone had energy to fight the good fight, or just to just be there and do our part. But now there's a shift in consciousness, and a lot of the people who've been fighting the good fight are tired
Mm,
of of explaining the same old, why that's inappropriate, why that's racist, why that's, it's just been over and over and over. Why we got to start saying a new narrative, and it's
mm,
it's just taking longer because the people in power are still, of the majority, are not native. And and I know that's going to change. I know that the energy, young people still have the energy to do it,
mm.
and they have voices to do it, right? Whereas people my age and older, not that they're getting burnt out, but they're getting burnt out, like, it's an exhausting fight because every still having to justify why our something is inappropriate, or this doesn't work, or this is just bullshit. um, Having to defend it still is exhausting.
How could it
And
get better?
changing the people in power
Mm,
who just get it,
talk
who
to
just
them.
get it.
Nice.
So yeah, so those who have energy, come on, step up, get in those positions of power, learn those skills,
Mm,
and get in those positions of power.
let's go.
Produce, executive direct, do those things, man. We need you.
Mm, listen, preach, trust me. So I love what you're saying because even in regards to Moccasin Flats and the significance of coming out with the series during that time and era, coming all the way now to 2020, creating or being involved with Tribal, and I found it exhausting myself. Like they're having trouble just reusing a different word and saying indigenous. That was kind of the tonality in the early stage of the series. It was like, oh, sorry, it's indigenous now, isn't it? And I was just like, yo, how have you not caught up yet? So I appreciate that insight in regards to, it's exhausting at the same time, but like you've been saying, we got to fight the good fight.
It's the only game in town.
Mm.
Well, but like, I tend to look at it from a spiritual perspective because
Yes.
I can't not.
Mm.
And to me, when an elder from Sagin First Nation, um, from the Turtle Lodge, Dave Kershane, leading Earthman is his name. He coined the term for me when he had an elders gathering back in 2012, and they coined the term for me. Now is the time of the rise of the sacred feminine. And I just went, boom. That's everything I am. That's everything I've been doing. That's who I am, right? That's what my role is. So it was huge. But when I look at the fight and the good fight, even the word fight, I
Mm.
want to take that away,
Makes sense.
because the rise of the sacred feminine to me means it's the rise of the voice that has not been heard. Every community that has been left out of the systems on this planet are being called to speak up, are being called to join the circle. So the systems are a whole bunch of boxes that are crumbling, are having to morph into circles.
Wow.
And they're gonna scream as they morph and die, right?
Mm,
So our systems are still very much boxy and linear and out of balance.
mm.
So everything that has been left out of those systems needs to come back in and be welcomed. So you're going to see the Indigenous voice rise up. You're going to see the voice of the woman through Me Too movement, through the national inquiry into the Indigenous, to the missing and murdered Indigenous women rise up. You're going to see the two-spirit and trans and queer community rise up. You're going to
So,
see the men, the environmental movement rise up, right? And the heart-centered leaders, the one who want balance in, and that's the men, heart-centered leaders, nurturing fathers, that's going to rise up.
mm,
People who are honoring their emotions, emotional expression, intuitive, creative, receiving, it's going to rise up.
wow.
Everything that's been left out needs to come home to the circle.
Mm. It's got to find its way home.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of young people and the rise up of the sacred feminine, one thing that I stumbled across that we both experienced was the Rita Joe I Lost My Talk project. And that was with the NAC back in, I think, 2016.
Wow.
You were part of the Nipawak, right? The
Yeah.
Nipawik in Edmonton, Alberta.
Yes.
And I was in Kitty and I did Ishko Day. And in
No.
Ishko Day, I was teamed up with Mo Clark. She was involved as well.
No way.
So I was just like, wow. So speaking of, our young people rising up, what was that experience like working on that project?
Oh my gosh. And I always, because I don't play an instrument, so sometimes I'm not as effective going, yeah, just play this chord. So Robert Walsh is my longtime collaborator, and we did that together. And I tell you, just watching synergy, as you said, the word
Mm,
synergy with there is so much creativity in our in our youth who are just bursting at the seams, needing to create and wanting to create, and knowing that they have permission. Like, just do it. Find any way you can to create. And the song they ended up building together, oh my God, it was so
right?
deep.
Did it
So,
not blow you away? Like when I was involved with that project, that was probably the first time I actually ever did a youth songwriting workshop.
yeah,
And I went in there not knowing what to expect. And I had a classroom of, small handful of young people who had the courage to show up, whether it
yes,
was against their will or not, they were there, really shy and awkward, but they delivered. They participated. It was uncomfortable, but they shared what they could. And I was so blown away because I write my own music, and we wrote a chorus and two verses in like less than 2 hours. I was like,
right.
do all y'all know that this is an amazing session right here? And then, so that was an incredible experience. And then I'm just, reflecting on what you're saying, how incredible it was. They came to Ottawa to perform at the NAC because it was held by the NAC. And so this was the first time I was going to hear any of them perform. And I'm sure it was the first time for a lot of them to ever perform. And they killed it. They killed
Mhm.
it. They shut it down. I was just like, wow, look at our young people shine. They started off shy and nervous and doing something they've never done before. They stepped out of their shell, and now look at the wings they have.
Oh, it
Oh,
was
it was
incredible.
so amazing. So shout out to the NAC for the Rita Joe I Lost My Talk. That was super amazing. I wanted to get into your TEDx Stanley Park
Mhm.
speech that you did. And I hesitated to say speech because it was more or less of your story. And, it was about being silent no more. And that's about speaking up against, violence against women, Indigenous women specifically. And, by all means, when I asked you the question, share with us as much as you'd like about that story because that's your story to tell, honestly. And I was so moved by that, by what you shared. And I wanted to hone in on the story that you talked about with your dog, Shady, and how she fell into the water and you had to dive in after her, bring her back to shore. And she was running around barking. And then you said the crows came in and they were crowing. And there was like nature showed up and they're all harmonizing. And then you made the point where that's where it clicked for you,
Mm.
where you're like, that was just Shady voicing and shaking off her fear using her voice. And nature came and showed up to support her. And that's when it clicked for you, where you found your voice too. And then you howled, and then nature showed up for you.
Mm.
And I thought that was so beautiful in you sharing that. And I it resonated with me so deeply. And so I wanted to ask you, how do you tap into the courage and the bravery it takes to share your story and your truth so raw and so real publicly?
Well, that story I had told, to everyone around me probably knew it, but you're right. Taking it from your friends and family know it to a big stage, I I struggled with that. It was about my experience. For those who haven't seen it, is about me coming out and me telling my story about how I suffered sexual violence when I was 13. Um, and that was just one story. I had, because you only have this amount of time, I had four stories that sort of had to morph into that story. So it's like I had to put two things together. Um, and I have, so that was me telling my story about how my voice was choked and how all these feelings, it just got locked into a ball. And for me, um, I had forgotten what that feeling of a hot burning throat felt like, where it's like your truth is burning a hole in your throat wanting to come out. And I'd forgotten what that felt like because it was 20, 30 years ago when it happened. And it came back while I was writing this. It came back. And it was happening around the Me Too movement. In a way, I was already about to do this when the Me Too movement happened. I went, because I almost went, I don't want this to be my message. I don't want this to be my message. I don't want to talk about this. Well, of course, I don't want to talk about it. No one wants to talk about sexual violence because it's such a joyful topic. It sucks and it's painful and it's shameful and embarrassing. All those things that I felt back when I was 13 and 12 and 14 and 15 came back. And so, I realized that I was wrestling. I don't want to talk about this subject, but the subject was picking me. The subject was choosing me.
Wow.
And again, the grandmothers, I'm like, seriously? So I'm writing it and I'm surrendering to it because that's what I've agreed to do here on this planet is, okay, I'm not doing anything unless it has a purpose. I'm not doing this for my ego. If I'm doing it for my ego, then I'm out. And this topic chose me. So when I started writing it, I started getting all those feelings again of shame and wanting to hide, and this burning lump in my throat came back. And I went, oh God, this is so important. I am needing to remember what this feels like so I can help others who are feeling it right now feel
Wow.
theirs.
Wow.
And of course, that's why I talk about Shady, because Shady didn't have shame around her feeling of fear and almost dying, or, she didn't like the nature doesn't have trapped fear in in their lineages. We trap it because, like when I do exercises, when I do workshops with people, I talk about opening up this whole front body. And and that means our throat too. And most of the time when something happens, we go whoop and we close in around as though there's a ball, and we close in around it and it stays there until we release it, until we open up again. And then we wonder why we sob and cry and have these meltdowns later on in life. Well, that day on the riverbank for me, I had been triggered into fear because I'd almost lost my dog, but she was frightened too. And we handled it so differently. And I went, oh yeah, this is the work I'm here to do, the expressor. I'm here to help people express, because most people have experienced fear. And look, we're in this COVID time full of fear. And what's happening? It's probably getting stuck again. We got to open up. We got to open up our throats. We can't let this stuff get stuck. We got to be like nature. We got to listen to nature and we got to open up. So yeah, that was my
Amazing.
experience all over again. but it
Oh,
was so worth it. My goodness.
the strength that you carry on your shoulders, I think is remarkable.
Mm.
And you carry it and you make it look so light. You know what I mean? Like you
Bless you.
laugh and you smile and you're positive about it. And I'm so inspired by you, Andrea. And I just want to thank you for everything that you've been sharing with us so far.
Oh.
Um, I wanted to transition into your YouTube channel because it's all tying into what you're talking about right now. And for those who don't know, Andrea Menard is a content creator. Like she has content that goes back years. And so it's an amazing thing. And I actually felt like every time I watched one of those episodes, I felt like I was going through a therapy session 101 in 5 to 7 minutes. It was super amazing. But I watched, so just to kind of give our audience a little bit more context, she has an ongoing series called Messages from the Patchwork Grandmothers, and she's just sharing her insight. I watched the Let Go of Victimhood.
Mm.
That one really resonated. Embrace your feminine, and how you identified the difference between male energy and female energy. And no matter which way you want to go, we all have female energy in us. And that really resonated with me as well. And then Love the Skin You're In, Have a Belly Laugh. But this is the one that really, I think I wanted to emphasize, is the one that you talked about. You deserve your dream.
Mm.
And I bring that up because it reminded me of experience that I had in university in an Aboriginal studies class. I read a book co-written by George Siwi, and he talked about when you receive visions, that's the creator giving you guidance. And the way that you put it, Andrea Menard, in that series was your dreams are your blueprint. And so I was reflecting with Raven Commando. Shout out to Raven Commando. She's been helping me out with a lot of this quality assurance. And she was like, that's the blueprint. Andrea Menard, EP.5 has helped us find the blueprint. And the blueprint is to follow your dreams, is
Mm.
to allow those visions. So that's not something simple though, because you go into it in those series that you have to allow yourself to get quiet in order for you to hear those whispers, in order for you to hear those voices. So what was the inspiration behind Messages from the Patchwork Grandmothers?
That's a good. I haven't been asked that in a while. Um, I was given a name, Not the Goyutin, which means grandmother wind in Cree. And I had been given that name, and I went, uh, grandmother wind? It's like, that's an elder's name. What the heck? You know, again, meltdown. And I
Right.
put it on the back burner for 4 years. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then I went to Hawaii, and I don't know what that land did to me. And I came home, grandmother wind. It's like alcohol left. Not that I drank that much, but left my life. You know, all these things that I went, what happened? And it's like the grandmothers, and they started coming to me in funny ways. Oh my gosh. Like I'm going, oh, that's why I keep making these these patchwork quilts. You guys like are literally grannies. Like you like patchwork quilt and doilies. I'm like, you guys are like, oh my gosh, you're actual grannies. You're not just like wise grandmothers. You're like grannies with their tea and their patchwork quilts and their crocheted. I went, no, I love that shit, man.
Straight up.
So anyway,
Wow.
once I embraced that part, and I made a promise that I was going to start to get to know them. And whoever, I always called them grandmothers, or, you know, the ones whispering to me, but who were they? And I recognized that they were, you know, when I focused in, I'm like, oh, you guys are like all over the place. You, you know, have a couple of, you know, real short Métis woman, you know, another Cree woman and a white woman, probably from my mom's side. I'm like, who are you, Granny? So there were patchwork, you know, there were a whole bunch of personalities. And anyway, so I started to, and as a test to myself, because as an actress, I always wanted to look amazing when I was on film. And I just thought, no, you know what? I got to get over that. I just want to be real. And so I would just turn the camera on and go, hi, it's me. And that was before live necessarily. I knew what live was, and I still don't really know what live is.
Yo, you do today. You do today.
I mean, yeah, I'm still kind of nerdy at it. But it was my way of just saying, well, show up and see what your thoughts have been about, what the grandmothers have been whispering to you. So that went on for several years. And it's funny that I just need to say that just last summer I was given a new name. So I'm not necessarily, it's like my new name is Shkotekwe, which means firewoman in Anishinaabe. And I at first thought, oh, I carry two names. And I do. But I also felt that the grandmothers went, you're not a granny yet. Go be your fiery self. You got to go perform and dance and live in the fire for a bit. So it's like the grandmothers had been fanning the flame of firewoman. And I went, oh, because if I do everything in fours, which I do, right? The medicine wheel, I am four. Like if you think grandmother wind is the element of air and fire is the element of fire. And of course I work with water and earth a lot. So I went, oh my gosh, I'm all four. So who am I now? What's this phase of my life? And so right now I'm assuming that firewoman is taking over from grandmother wind at the moment. So I've been the Sacred Feminine Learning Lodge is all coming from firewoman. And so messages from the patchwork grandmothers are just going to morph to come from the Sacred Feminine Learning Lodge. Isn't that funny?
That's amazing.
So it's like I have had to walk into each name. And the first one was the hardest for me because I went, I'm not an elder. Who do I think I am? Everyone's going to think I'm like, yeah, elders don't care about that. You got to step into who you are. And now again, I have to be willing to shift. Oh my gosh. Well, am I allowed to just let a name go? Like, how does this work? Right. But I have to be brave enough to make a change. Right. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
They were fanning your flame.
Right.
Whoa.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Listen, thank you for sharing a lot of that in regards to the inspiration behind the patchwork grandmothers. I love that series, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time watching some more of those because they're so therapeutic. And I appreciate the fact that you create that kind of content and that you share it publicly. I think that I wanted to also highlight on that note is we can use social media for good. And I think there's a taboo kind of perspective that sometimes our Indigenous people tiptoe around, because what's culturally sensitive, what should be public, what shouldn't, especially when you're talking about spirit and ceremony and stuff like that. So I appreciate that you've used your YouTube channel in such a good way to share and channel those messages from the patchwork grandmothers. I think that's amazing. So thank you again for that. But I wanted to, I guess, we'll transition. I wanted to spend the rest of our time here talking about the sacred feminine, the rise of the sacred feminine. Do you remember when and where you were when you started receiving that vision?
When the day hits, when everything falls into place, because when you remember the day when you look back and go, I've been doing this forever.
Right.
I didn't know it, but I've been doing this forever. Oh, you know what I mean? Those, like I said, I love those moments when all the pieces just all of a sudden go click.
Right.
Oh, I didn't know there were pieces of that. I mean, I should know that because it always works that way. The rise of the sacred feminine was a way for me to put a circle or a title or a world around all the ways I wanted to change the world. I didn't know why because if I, like I said earlier, all the things that need to come back into the circle, all the things that were left out of the systems need to come back in. And if you think of what those are, I've been a voice somehow in some way for all of them. As a singer, I started creating and wanting to create positive music as though, I coined the term music messenger before I heard the term positive music, because now there's a whole positive music movement. But I didn't know where I could create music that people were responsible, like the songwriter was responsible with the words they used. That some people they care what they put in their body, right? But music, they weren't caring what was going in their ears. And all the victim, lust, revenge, blame, all that stuff was just feeding our ears way too much. And so, again, that was music messenger, but to me, that was the rise of the sacred feminine, but I didn't know it, and then there's over here wanting, like, deeply connecting to urban gardens and farmers markets and caring about the earth and eating vegetables. And, that's people who were nurturing the planet and buying local and buying sustainable products. That was the rise of the sacred feminine,
Mm.
and then there was, my stories that I created and songs and they all made sense. All, and of course the rise of ending violence against women. All of those things all of a sudden came together into a one circle that I went, this is all the rise of the sacred feminine. This is everything I am. And of course, nobody told me that. But like, again, when we talked about dreams, no one's going to tell you your dreams, audience. Your dreams are going to be whispered to you and given to you, and you have to interpret them. You have to figure out what those clues mean. But that's the creative process, right? That's the puzzle, the fun of listening.
Mm.
And for me, those puzzles came, those clues came together with the Sacred Feminine Learning Lodge. And I have been so inspired to finally have a clear path of what that looks like. I'm now here to help others get in touch with their sacred feminine by going inward, by learning to respect their feelings, by learning how to access their voice, their creativity, and to break down some of the systems by breaking down our own habits. So that's a
Incredible.
long-winded answer,
Oh,
but
I loved it. No, I love it. I think any opportunity to share about the rise of the sacred feminine is an important conversation to have uninterrupted. So I appreciate you explaining a lot of that and where the intentions come from and where your visions come from and how it all came full circle. I think that's so important. And so my follow-up question to that one, I'll ask you just two more questions and we'll finish up. What can men do to support the rise of the sacred feminine?
great question. Great question. Um, okay, so there's a two-part answer. From what I'm hearing from all the elders that I've been talking to who are using this language, a lot of them are saying it's the time of woman. And I would go, okay, yeah, because there's the rise of the sacred feminine, there's the time of woman. And I'm going to acknowledge that and say it is the time for women to take the lead on that we carry the womb of creation within our bodies, and the creation, the harmony that exists in creation exists in the womb if we allow it, if we learn how to share it with our men, with our children, with the whole circle. So it is the time of woman. So women need to find within them the courage to lead during this time. They're going to be called to rise up to who you are meant to be. So that's one thing. So men can honor that journey of the woman. This is the woman's time to lead because they know exactly what needs to be done. In the old times, an elder said to me, women were the ones who dispersed the fund, the money, the food, the belongings, so that the men would bring it to the circle and it would be distributed by the women, because the women knew the specific needs of the entire community. The woman knew where it needed to go. So the fact that the men are holding on to the funds right now is why it's not going out to all the right places.
Wow.
Because women know that intuitively. They know where it needs to go. These go the elders, the children, education, the health. We just know. And the women of communities know that, in all communities of all globes, of all across the globe. So there's about imbalance in that. So if men support women and maybe help those funds travel to the right people, because they will be distributed evenly to the places that needs to go, which will create balance. So that's one way that men can help.
Love that.
Helping men or helping the women. But men, what you can do yourselves is to honor your own sacred feminine. You're not, and that does not mean you're female. It means you have a sacred feminine. Every single part of life has a sacred feminine and a sacred masculine. And your sacred feminine is your emotional nature, is your nurturing nature, is your compassionate nature, is your intuitive nature, is your creative nature, collaborative. And those need to grow in you. They need to be honored in you. And we feel for you because we know that you have not been honored for those skills. When you showed them, you were bashed down, you were ridiculed, you were shamed. And we know that this is violence at its worst, because that part of you is very, very sacred. It's part of every single human. It's sacred in every human. And in order for the world to start honoring those qualities, you as individuals need to start owning and honoring that quality in you, which means you will start now honoring your children that way. So this is a message to all human beings, is that those parts of your nature have been the unpopular parts of our personality, right? They're the ones that are kind of the unpopular kid on the block. But we gotta make room for those parts of ourselves, because that's where our wisdom lies. That's where our communal force lies. And the other parts have just been overdeveloped. There's nothing wrong with drive and determination and logic and analyzing and systems. Nothing wrong with those if they have been balanced with the sacred feminine. But a lot of the systems have not been. They've tried over the years, but they have not. They weren't built that way. So there's nothing wrong with those skills. But if they've been overdeveloped, that means that other things have been underdeveloped. So let's just develop those other parts. Let's get balanced. Let's get balanced. Human beings are meant to do this, right? Nice. And if you look at the sacred, you could also, a lot of people say, oh, sacred feminine teachings is kind of like Indigenous teachings. I went, exactly. But not everyone can say I'm Indigenous, but every single person can say I have a sacred feminine. Wow. So that's why I'm really using that term, because everyone can acknowledge that within them and grow it.
That is so significant. And the simple first step you're recommending is to tap into your own sacred feminine. And the more of us allow that to grow, is the better off we can allow the rise of the sacred feminine to take place.
Yeah. A movement only happens with one individual and another individual and another individual and another one and another one. And all of a sudden you have a society that has changed because something that was popular before is just, I can't believe you used to live like that. And your generation, we already see that in yours. You guys look at us like, you guys put up with that shit? Are you insane? Like, we don't believe that. I mean, it's beautiful to watch, but just think of that your children are going to be thinking about you.
Wow.
Individuals make up a movement.
Wow. That is so amazing. Yo, honestly, this is incredible. Okay, I got one more question for you, Andrea. It's going to be a hard one, but I think it's an important way for us to end. Okay. What does the next 7 generations look like to you? And I'm saying that in the sense of, like, if you could paint a picture of the future, what would it look like to Andrea Menard?
Oh, baby, I like that question a lot. No war. No war. And I mean war in the little sense and the big sense. I think we are going to birth children that think it is ridiculous. And that means the violence that is within us right now, trapped in our lineages. Remember, I don't think that is necessarily human nature. I think it's trapped collective trauma. And that means every human being and every nation on this planet has suffered horrific trauma. And the settlers that came to this land, they brought their trauma with them, you know. So it's every nation on this planet have suffered trauma. And so to me, you know, looking at, if we're going to look 7 generations, I'm like, let's go big. Let's go
Let's
big.
go. Let's
Oh,
go.
I like
I'm
big.
right here with you.
I love it. I see us birthing generations of children who grow wearier and wearier and wearier of violence of any kind. I mean, violence, violent thoughts, violent lateral violence, violent words, violent actions, which means that compassion will build. Compassion will grow, collaboration will grow, reconciliation will just be a natural part of the children we're birthing, because it takes a long time for humans to evolve. It takes a while. It takes generations. So when we're talking 7 generations, I go, we can do this. We can imagine individuals like the rise of the sacred feminine. Imagine one family at a time who heal their collective trauma so that the children born to that particular family don't have it. They have a clean lineage. Could you imagine? So do your work, people, because you don't know what you're paving the way for the children to come. Do your inner work. It's the only game in town.
Oh my God. Yes, Andrea. Whoa, I could see that. And I can,
Right?
you know what I love about the way you said it is that it feels tangible. It's doable. Start with your healing the trauma within your own family. And when you raise that next generation, when you have kids, heal that trauma so that the next generation is stronger as a result. Like that is
Heal it in you.
beautiful. Right.
Heal it in you. That's the only person you can heal it in.
Right.
Children will automatically come in cleaner because of the work you did.
Oh, damn.
So do your work. It's so worth
Whoa.
it.
Oh
So
my
worth it.
God. Whew, I got goosebumps right now.
Bless
That's
your heart.
amazing. Okay, I have to share mine though, and I can do it in one word.
Yes. Oh gosh,
Matri-
mine was not one word.
matri- matriarch.
Ooh.
That's the future. That's
Mm.
the next 7 generations and beyond, run by women. Full stop.
Beautiful. Oh, I like that.
Andrea, thank you again so much for joining us on this No Blueprint series.
Mm.
Thank you for your patience and taking the time to navigate all these different technologies all at the same time so we could share our story with the broadest audience possible. But I cannot thank you enough for taking your time, especially during these COVID times, to join us here today, to share your story, to share your truth, and allow me to get a peek behind the curtain to help humanize, a lot of these experiences in the entertainment industry and just hear from you. I'm so grateful. So thank you again for being here, Andrea.
Justin, you are one heck of a host. Thank you for receiving. See, there's that sacred feminine, receiving this, creating a sacred space to receive a good message and a good conversation between the two of us. I love you, my brother.
Yes, love you too. Thank you. And yes, I hope we'll cross paths soon. And I guess that's it for now. So thank you again.
Bye, everyone.
Wash
Bye.
day.